Today we'll illuminate your understanding, much like the Renaissance, with valuable insights, specifically with the brilliance of LED lighting. Because today we are going to talk about LED strips on board, direct lighting, indirect lighting, intensity and color control, and how to use all of that to dramatically improve the lighting and appearance of our boats, campers, or our own homes. Because today we are going to thoroughly uncover all the hidden secrets of LED strip lighting.
Wait, I see you there. I see you.
What's wrong with you?
I see you looking super sharp today. How's it going? What could it be? What could it be? What could it be? I know you're now in 4K.
No, it's the lighting, it's the LED.
Is it the LED?
Greetings sailors and welcome to an exciting new episode of The Low Cost Sailor. In today's episode we will be discussing onboard lighting, the significance of having excellent lighting, and how with just a few LED strips we can revitalize our onboard spaces and give them the appearance of the most modern generation boats.
This interests me. Those LED lights my daughters want to put in their room with all those colors.
Because onboard illumination not only possesses a functional aspect but also an aesthetic and well-being component. It can render spaces more inviting, enhance our capacity to work on board, and rejuvenate the interior appearance, making our boats seem more youthful. All of this can be accomplished quite economically by utilizing LED strips and modulating their brightness with a variety of controllers. These controllers will enable us to fine-tune the brightness, hue, and particularly the energy consumption according to our specific requirements at any given moment. We will even explore how, with a minimal amount of money, we can automate the management of onboard lighting to control the lights and scenes from virtually anywhere. Don't miss it because we are going to learn a lot and greatly improve the onboard experience at night. Turn off all the lights on the boat, let's see if we notice the difference. LED lighting is among the initial modifications I implemented on my boat several years ago. We devoted an entire episode to this topic, specifically episode 37, over 3 years ago, where we extensively discussed the functionality and benefits of LED lighting in contrast to the halogen bulbs that originally came with my boat. Changing halogen bulbs to LED was a very simple change that allows you to get the same amount of light with about a quarter of the energy consumption. However, I must admit that within my boat, the circular spotlights that were scattered throughout the vessel were still delivering inadequate illumination, at least by the lighting standards we anticipate in today's world. Aside from the poor location of the switches, which are usually installed in the fixtures themselves and are not a very accessible area. That's when I started to experiment a bit with LED strips and give a bit more flexibility to the position of the switches. I started by installing switches directly at the entrance to the boat, both for a direct light LED strip I installed back then and for some indirect light ones I placed on the sides of the salon. The truth is that it turned out to be infinitely more useful than the original lights, in addition to being able to turn them on from the door when you enter and off when you leave, which is logical. I don't know why they don't think of this when designing a boat. The truth is that the original options for the boat with round spotlights require you to move in the dark until you reach the spotlight itself. I have been very happy with this solution for years, although the LED strips I installed back in the day leave much to be desired compared to more modern options. Although the illumination was rather satisfactory, particularly regarding energy consumption when I needed to work indoors or when we had to record during nighttime, the lighting still seems somewhat inadequate, and Carlos much scarcer.
Of course.
So after seeing how modern boats are illuminated today, the sense of spaciousness provided by good lighting and the use of indirect lights on board, or as we saw in our episode on night sailing, being able to illuminate softly in red or other colors during navigation to avoid dazzling us, a lot of possibilities presented themselves. And with that, I decided to upgrade the onboard lighting using LED strips to give my boat a new, more spacious and brighter look, but with some important premises for me. Not to run short on light. To be able to illuminate the interior with a lot of light when necessary, like an operating room. To be able to adjust the light intensity so that in most cases I only use the amount appropriate for my needs, thereby having limited energy consumption. Improve the use of indirect lighting in the cabins with the idea of completely stopping the use of round spotlights. I had to place bedside lamps closer because I lacked really powerful lighting, so those round spotlights that come with the boat were left unused. enhance the placement of the switches for these lights, and optimize the utilization of the switches to ensure that energy consumption is absolutely zero when the lights are turned off. But at the same time, why not use Wi-Fi regulators integrated with the applications I already use on board to control, for example, all those lights remotely with their intensities and colors? And also, it's impossible for me to make a mistake with the position of the switches, because at the same time I could control any light on the boat from any screen, from my phone, or even by voice from my watch. Well, with all this in mind, we begin the process. The first thing was to choose the type of LED strips most suitable for my purposes. When I first installed them on board, there wasn't as much variety as there is today, but we could focus on several types based on some of their characteristics. There are two types of LED strip formats: SMD type, where the LEDs are individually visible, and COB type, where a continuous strip of fluorescent silicone is visible, which is what apparently illuminates. The first ones are cheaper, but they look like a set of separate light points. In fact, they used to be put in a diffuser if you wanted the light points to be less noticeable, although that's what I've had on board until now, and it didn't look bad either. However, COB strips appear as a continuous line of light, which can be left visible with a really good appearance. In my case, and with my previous experiences, I have decided on COB strips. Additionally, they tend to have a higher water resistance, making them suitable for outdoor use. I have one under the boom for 3 years now, and it's still there, surviving. The next decision is the tone. White light is not entirely white and is usually worked with various warmth tones ranging from pure white, which is almost bluish, to the warmer white, which we could say is almost yellow. These values are usually measured with color temperature, with 6000 K, 6000 degrees Kelvin being pure white and 3000 K the warm yellow that incandescent bulbs used to give. In my case, I have chosen natural white of 4500 K, a middle ground.
Which team do you belong to? I'm part of the operating room team. It's an extremely bright white light.
I used to be on team operating room. Of course, I'm not on team yellow.
My partner is associated with the team fireplace fire.
Fireplace fire? That feels excessively warm. However, I am convinced that virtue resides in the middle ground. Natural white, just like me. But, if in doubt, you can also buy RGB LED strips that allow you to light up in any color or shade you want. For the living room, I've installed a couple of RGB strips for indirect lighting. You can install RGB lights at home, and that way, you can argue with your wife daily instead of just once. RGB lights cost more, need a controller, and have less light intensity per meter. But in return, you can do really cool things with them. Finally, it's time to choose the light intensity. Normally, the intensity of the light can be measured in lumens per meter, but it is also related to consumption, which can be indicated in watts per meter or with the LED density that the strip has. It would be marked as LED per meter. And of course, the more meters, the more light, of course, but you should adjust the length of the strips to the space where you are going to place them. They can be cut without any problem every few centimeters. My advice here is to buy with the maximum intensity you want in mind and purchase the dimmable ones so you can lower the intensity most of the time. A lot of decisions led me to buy a good set of LED strips. For general lighting, I chose COB with 512 LEDs per meter, 12 volts and about 10 watts per meter, dimmable and with a tone of 4500 K, which is commonly called natural white, for less than €3 per meter. Additionally, I bought another pair of COB RGB LED strips, 10 watts per meter, 12 volts, with their corresponding Wi-Fi controllers, which also come with an infrared remote control to adjust and change the color. €10 each for 1 meter. Honestly, with everything including the regulator and the remote, it's quite cheap. I'll leave the links in the video description and on the post on our website. Additionally, I bought some small embedded switches for 5x €1.5, a few male and female connectors to facilitate connection and disconnection, and especially to make it easier to incorporate the Wi-Fi regulators into the setup. 5 pairs of connectors for €2.3. For the white lights, I couldn't resist converting them to dimmable, and I bought a dimmer for each cabin. I bought them with Wi-Fi and made sure they worked with the Tuya Smart app because that's what I use for everything. About €5 each enables a lot of things for me. And with all this, I set out to improve the lighting on my boat. The installation is very simple. The white LED strips come with 2 wires at one end to power them directly at 12 volts. It's simply a matter of installing a switch that cuts the positive, and everything is connected to the battery or any 12-volt power source on board, usually to the switch panel with a fuse. You can see the diagram. You can cut them to the length you want, and even the leftover pieces can be reused by soldering new wires to them or simply making the contacts with some clips. With this technique, I installed 2 direct light strips in the living room, replacing the ones I had and even reusing the switches. Honestly, those were super easy for me. All I did was cut them to the length of the available space and connect them where the others were. I added 2 hidden 1-meter strips in the forward cabin. There I had to complete the installation by running the power cable, adding a fuse, sticking both strips to the sides of the cabin in a concealed manner, drilling to place one of the switches within easy reach, and adding connectors that would allow me to add a controller if needed. Of course, when you do this and see how good it looks, you get excited and can't stop. To the one they already had under the boom, I added another indirect light in the starboard cabin and one more to properly illuminate the port side, which I usually use as a storage room with the corresponding fuses, switches, of course, and as we will see later, with space for the Wi-Fi regulators, which I was sure I would end up installing. In the living room, it was clear that I needed a dim light that I could set to red while navigating at night to avoid being dazzled.
Like in submarines.
It's called a submarine light, and I installed RGB strips on each side. I took advantage of the existing installation and switches for some white strips, which is what was here before, and replaced them with the RGB ones with their controller. One controller for each strip, leaving the infrared sensor visible. It could be operated directly with the remote or via Wi-Fi from the mobile. I installed 2 controllers just to be able to set a different color on each side, because for example I can light up port in red and starboard in green, and thanks to them being over the 2 skylights of the hull, I can replace or complement the navigation lights if necessary. And why not say it, because they look really cool and you can create some super awesome effects thanks to the ability to control even the LED sets independently of these multicolor strips. They've even been handy for Christmas celebrations. For RGB lights, installing the controller is mandatory, and you can use them directly with the remote control that comes integrated. In the case of white lights, this is optional. You can keep them powered directly and have the switch be either 0% or 100% light, or you can add a controller for dimming. Adding it is as easy as placing the dimmer between the connectors. The next step will be to connect it to your boat's Wi-Fi. I've told you 1,000 times how valuable it is to have Wi-Fi on board. The RGB lights come with a remote in case you don't have Wi-Fi or don't want to use it, but the ones I bought for white light lose part of their purpose without Wi-Fi, even though they have a button that allows you to switch between different intensities. Their purpose is to connect them to Wi-Fi through the Tuya Smart app. With the application already installed, it becomes relatively straightforward to connect the devices. With the light turned on, we can place the controller into pairing mode. To do this, we will open the app on the phone, press the plus to add a new device, and it will start searching for nearby devices. Now we need to put the controller in pairing mode. This task can be accomplished in 2 different ways, either by pressing and holding down the button on the controller for a duration of 5 seconds until the light begins to flash, or if the controller is not within reach, by swiftly turning the switch off and on 3 consecutive times until the light starts flashing, and it will then enter pairing mode. The application will detect a new device, and we can now name it, assign it to a room, and it will be ready to use from the app. In the case of the white lights, we can turn them on and off from anywhere, well, as long as we have left the physical switch on, and we can also adjust their brightness. Moreover, if we set it to a certain intensity and turn it off with the physical switch, it will remember that intensity level, so our less tech-savvy guests can continue using the lights with the switches. In the case of RGB, the possibilities multiply. Besides turning them on and off, changing the color and intensity of the set, we can choose colors by segments, or turn off some segments, or even create some crazy effects. It even features an integrated microphone, allowing it to react and shift colors in response to sound and music. It's absolutely wild, like a festival of vibrant colors. I assure you that you have enough to play for a good while.
The individual who came up with the idea of incorporating a microphone into the light fixture must have been quite the party enthusiast.
It has to be super cheap to install. Let's move on to the more practical part. We have added the regulators because we wanted to be able to control both the light intensity and the consumption, to know how much things on board consume. Even creating a chart with the consumption of each item on board is a very good practice, especially when you are anchored or sailing and want to carefully manage the duration of your batteries with the things you have turned on. This can be done with battery consumption meters, which we have discussed in other episodes, by turning each thing on and off and observing the increase on the battery meter. Another option is with a dedicated meter, like the one I bought on AliExpress for €4, which, with standard connectors, allows me to stand in front of any onboard circuit and know the voltage and amperage consumption both instantaneously and cumulatively. All this up to a maximum of 12 amperes of current, and between 4 and 30 volts is what it is capable of measuring. Additionally, I have tested it against a power supply and the device is quite accurate. Thanks to it, I've been able to verify a few things. At exactly 12 volts, the consumption is a specified 10 watts per meter, although if you connect it directly to the battery and the voltage increases, for example during charging, this can almost double. That makes it advisable to regulate the input to 12 volts or use a controller like me to be able to regulate the intensity. I have also found that in longer strips the consumption per meter is somewhat lower, probably because the voltage drops in such a long strip. By incorporating the regulator, I have been able to verify that the regulator for the white lights adds a nearly negligible consumption of about 0.01 amperes, which is 0.1 watts, and it is capable of dimming a percentage of the illumination which is directly proportional to the consumption. That is, at 50%, it illuminates half and consumes half. Certainly, if the external power supply is at 12 volts, it equates to 5 watts. However, if it is charging at 14 volts, for instance, then because the initial point is elevated, it becomes 8 watts instead of 5 watts. All this for the white light version. With the RGB one, well, the controller with the light off consumes a bit more. It has a microphone, 0.7 watts of power, so in these cases the physical switch makes more sense because that way we lower it to 0. Turned on at 100% in white, the color that consumes the most, we're talking about a little over 7 watts per meter. At 12 volts, this regulator seems less sensitive to the power supply voltage, because if we increase it to 14 volts, where the other one, for example, increased to 18 watts and the light also increased, this one seems to regulate it well and barely rises to 8 watts while maintaining the light intensity. And if we reduce the intensity to 50%, the consumption drops to 4 watts, meaning it's not exactly half, because you can notice the 0.7 watts that the regulator itself consumes. But anyway, even starting from an unregulated source like our boats, we can regulate the consumption and light intensity very well with these regulators. They work very well and the ship is looking spectacular. Beyond the special effects of the colored lights and having a very intense light on board when we have to film or when you're doing some repairs, the appearance of the ship and the cabins has improved a lot. The use of physical switches still makes sense, at least for the RGB lights, even though the white lights hardly add any additional consumption, and we could turn them on and off virtually. Most of the time there is plenty of light, and for example at night on board, with 10% of the salon light, it looks good and is comfortable. However, having the ability to increase the light to 100% when you need it, knowing it affects consumption, is very good. And since the device with a physical switch remembers the last selected intensity, using it without the app all the time is perfectly possible. Well, without the app, although there are many other ways to control it, because for example, I'm now going crazy controlling everything with my voice, talking to my watch, turning things on and off, using natural language, adjusting lights and colors of various lights at once, all by speaking and in a natural way. Illuminate every single light on the entire vessel and adjust the portside light to a deep crimson hue while setting the starboard light to a rich emerald shade. A marvel to which we will soon dedicate an episode, because this is not just about controlling the lights with your voice, but the entire ship, and also asking questions. Well, I'm not going to spoil anything, as this episode is yet to come. Thank you very much for your attention, sailors. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, you have the bell to receive notifications, you have all the links of what we have talked about, both in the description, in the video, and on our website www.thelowcostsailor.com. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to our generous Patreons who are consistently providing their invaluable support to us, as well as to our primary sponsor for this year, Smart Sails. Regardless, we shall meet again in a few weeks with a brand new episode of The Local Sailor.
Very disappointed with this video. Very disappointed because I went in there, sat down, and did it. And I clapped twice and the lights didn't turn on.
Yes, because it recognizes my claps.
Only yours, not mine.
Of course, otherwise everyone would come here to applaud. No, be quiet, be quiet.